and introducing myself and welcoming everyone on behalf of Nerwin. And these are our Friday gardening sessions, container gardening. And if you want to ask any questions, please feel free to put that in the chat box. And I have trouble spelling Kalanchoe, trouble pronouncing it as well. There's a house plant we used last week. It's also called Flaming Katie, which is much more easier to remember, but somebody's put in the chat box how to spell it. So there we go. It's a lovely flowering plant for indoors, and I would highly recommend it. I love it. So easy to care for. Of course, with most plants, it needs good drainage, and most plants don't like to sit in water, whether they're outside or inside, for the most part. So this week, we're starting to go into outdoor containers. And I have to say, it's been quite limited what I could get access to because garden centers are still closed. And, so there's quite a lot of limitations on shops and things that I can get access to. However, I've got a pot for out the front door. So this time of year, everyone usually wants a wee pot or basket for out the front door, or, a couple of wee pots out the back door with color, something that's going to flower and take us through to summer. And of course, coming into summer, there's loads of lovely bedding plants. And bedding plants is a term that I use, and it basically means color for the season. So there's spring bedding plants, there's wee plants like violas, I'll show you those, and pansies. Wee sort of bedding plants that you can pick up this time of year, and people would put these into their baskets or their wee tubs. And if you already have a wee tub that you're trying to just add a bit of color into, or your baskets, a lot of times your tub, already had plants in it and already had, wee plants from last year, and it's maybe sort of sitting empty. And you can just take away a bit of that top compost and put in a multi-purpose compost, and you can get all sorts of multi-purpose compost, and some of it will have added fertilizer in it, which keeps your plants going for a wee while. Or you can get the likes of your slow release fertilizer and put some of that in and freshen up your wee pots. Going into summer, I like to put the wee moisture tablets in, or moisture sort of gel. And I don't really do it for spring. You can, if you think your pots were going to dry out outside very quickly, or you sort of forget to water them and they get dry. My pots in spring are generally very wet because it rains, a lot. So I wouldn't bother, but come summer, if I'm putting in wee flowers into my pots, I might put a wee bit of that in. It tells you on the package how much to put in. For example, 2 teaspoons for every 10 liters. So that's a nice little thing. And of course, the slow release fertilizer tells you how much to put in for your pot size. And it sort of, every time there's water that goes into the pot, it releases a little bit of food, nutrients for the plants. And it's supposed to last for 6 months. I generally use the slow release in the spring, but in summer, I like to go to liquid feed. And while we're on feed, just sort of show you what I use for my containers. And I use the Miracle-Gro, and most of you probably have some of this. It's great, and it tells you how to mix. So, 1 large spoonful, it has a wee spoon that comes with it for 4.5 liters of water, and it can be used on your baskets, your flower pots, and your flowering perennials, and just all your plants basically. And feeding your plants will definitely, they need nutrients. All wee plants, whether they're indoor plants or outdoor plants, they all need, water, nutrients, conditions in terms of sun, warmth, or or partial sun, you know, some sort of growing conditions. And your weed plant labels are always great. It's good to check those. I know sometimes we go into shop more excited. I know I am. Maybe plants are coming into the shops and think, oh, I want that one and that one. And then you get home and one of them needs direct, like a lot of sun, a sunny location, and think, oh, where I was wanting to put them, it's not really that sunny. So, and they won't do as well. So just check the wee plant tags. So what we're gonna use today, I have a big pot, very big pot. So I'll have to adjust the camera, but it's going outside. And where I'm at, I don't know about your conditions, but where I'm at, it is very, very windy, and my pots will just fall over if they're not either large or weighted down. So that's something to consider, because you can get nice wee pots everywhere for anywhere from £1 for a nice wee pot at the pounds shops up to garden centers and B&Q, and pots could be, you know, they could go up to £100 depending on the size of them. Great big old nice pot could be quite expensive. So I'm going to show you the pot in a wee minute, but I'll look at the wee flowers. And like I said, it was a bit tricky getting plants, so I'll just have to use what I've been able to access. But what we're looking for is something with a wee bit of height, sort of like the indoor planter. For an outdoor planter, you do want a wee bit of height. So that peace lily was given some wee height there. And then I want something obviously that's going to have some color. Oh, and there's somebody that's getting in. She must have got locked out before. Okay, there we go. Hopefully she can get in now. So the three key elements to a container really is a bit of height, a bit of color, and something to soften the edges. And that way Ivy is kind of in a strange position, but anyway, she's gone sort of, there we go, like that. So that's what we're looking for with our outdoor containers as well. And for a height, I've had to go with an azalea. I'm sure most of you know what azaleas are, but they're a wee shrub, flowering shrub. They flower in spring, and a lot of people get azaleas and rhododendron mixed up, but rhododendrons are grow bigger, and azaleas will be slower growing, smaller plants. So the azalea is a great wee plant for a tub or a container. So I'm going to use that, and they flower in spring, and this particular one is going to have sort of salmony, coral salmony sort of flowers on it, like a coral pink. And so that's going to be, that's a great wee plant too. That can stay in a container for a couple of years because it's slow growing. So it's sometimes nice to have something that you can leave in, a couple of wee plants that can be left in, and then you can replace your flowers for spring or summer, wee bedding plants. So other plants, that common plants to give you a bit of height in your containers. I mean, all of you, if you see any wee containers made up, and there are ones about this year, not that many. Wherever I have been able to go and spot some wee containers, I've noticed there's not that, there's not a whole lot available yet. I don't know if that will change, but you'll notice wee conifers, like cypress conifers is a very common wee plant for a bit of height. And sometimes you can pick those up for about 99p a pound, 1.99. So it's an inexpensive wee bit of height that can give you into a container. Grasses, get nice sort of tallish grasses, give you a bit of height, and they're lovely in containers. And even wee cordyline, those little cordyline plants are inexpensive, and you can get a small one, and they can give you a bit of height and interest in a wee pot. So, but that's all I could find. So I've had to go with the azalea. And then in terms of my continuous color, this time of year, violas and pansies are sort of what's coming out for us to sort of bring into our containers for spring. And so I'm going to use some of these, and they're, you know, a few pounds for a tray. That was probably 3 pounds for a tray of 2, 4, 6, 8, about 10. So, and then the other thing I'm going to use just to get a bit of movement, and I wanted something to come over the edges a wee bit. And to be honest, I couldn't access anything. So what I'm going to look at using is a grass just to soften some of the edges a wee bit. The petunias will bulk out a wee bit as they grow and fill in, but I just wanted something to sort of, you know, at a medium height. Ideally, I was going for something a bit taller, something sort of medium height, and something sort of to give the flower the color. And like I say, it was kind of limited in terms of what I could get access to. So I've got a couple of those wee grasses, and I've also got this black grass. Just see if you can sort of see there. Now the plant labels aren't going to be the right ones because these I have grown. And in terms of grasses, these are very easy to grow. This is black mondo grass, and you can get it in the garden centers. And a pot of that, smaller than that, is probably going to cost 10 to 12 pounds. I think it's quite expensive, and you can actually divide these, and they have a massive sort of root system that runs under the ground. I find these a wee bit invasive if they're planted into the ground, but they're great for pots and things. You have to contain them. They are a good wee plant for the ground and stuff too. They're different, they're black, but I do find them just a little bit invasive because they're a bit hard to get out of the ground if you plant them into the ground. So black mondo grass. And then I put the names of the plants in the wee chat box. And this is wee grass that keeps that color all year round, and it gets sort of these wee seed heads that come up. And the seed heads, you can get like little bits of it sort of you know, growing, coming up around the ground where you have it planted. So you can pull those out or make wee plants. It's very easy to make additional plants. So I've got those, and I usually make some wee plants and give them to my neighbor. So I thought I would use these today just to give something, a bit of texture, different color, and hopefully with the coral color and the color of these being sort of the burgundy, I was thinking that would sort of tie in. And it was sort of all I could get a bit of access to. So I'm going to plant up. I'll just check camera there. And I'm going to bring my wee pot up here. I'm going to put some gloves on. Now the multi-purpose compost that I'm using has added John Ives in it. So it has some fertilizer in it. And I can't lift the bag because it's heavy. It's a massive big 50-liter bag. So I'm not going to put any of the slow release fertilizer in at the minute. Just going to leave that. And yeah, there's a lot more variety coming into summer in terms of your wee pots and things. And again, just to freshen up, if you've pots or baskets sitting, just get a, you know, wee tray like that and freshen up your pots. Put a bit of slow release fertilizer and maybe some bit of fresh compost a few inches on the top, and put your wee plants in just for a spot of color. So I'm going to lift up a bit and maneuver maneuver the plants. Like I say, I have this big giant pot. So this is about, let's see here. I'll hold this up, but this is quite a big pot. And if you missed at the beginning, it was sort of saying, the reason why I'm using a big pot is for the front door. So I want it to be big and a bit of a statement, you know. And there we go, the size. So it's 40 centimeter diameter. And I wrote down the height, just to give you an idea, 35 centimeter height. And it's about a 40, 50 liter pot. So it's quite a big pot. So with a big pot like this, ideally I could be putting in, you know, a nice wee good sized grass or a wee shrub to give me a bit of height and a bit of interest. But again, I'm going to just have to go with what I've been able to get. And gonna go with the wee azalea. And I'm going to have to fill this up quite, usually it'll leave an inch or two and don't fill the pot all the way up. But I'll fill it up good ways because I want to look at my planting. I want to plant all my plants basically where they're at in their pots. So just have a look there and see. And so that's what I'm thinking, a bit of grass. When you're planting up a container, you do tend to squish in the plants a bit, as many plants as you can get in, because you want something that's going to draw the eye and be of interest. I think a wee bit of ivy would have, or something trailing over would have been nice, but I just couldn't get anything at the minute. Even a wee bit of ivy or something would have been nice, but I'll go with this. And generally for the front door or back door, somewhere near your windows, you are generally putting in more plants than you normally would, sort of into the ground. You know, I'm not going to give a lot of growing room in my pots because I want sort of enough interest and color, but it means I have a nice big pot. So I'll just have to watch the watering and the feeding. And if anything starts to take over, don't think they will in one season. You know, these grasses will probably get twice that big by the end of summer because they're well rooted with a good root system. Wee bit of moss there. I'll take off. Okay, so now just before I fill this all the way up, some of you, in case you're new to gardening, you need a drainage hole in your pot. And there are pots now that do not have a drainage hole, and you have to, you know, get a drill or something. I've seen pots that don't even have a wee space that you can push in to make your drainage hole, which is very strange. That maybe they're for indoor, but you need a drainage hole. And then on the bottom of your pot, didn't want to bring all that in because it's very heavy, but I have some broken up tiles or broken up crocks. And you put that over your drainage hole so it doesn't get clogged up. If you don't put something in the bottom, it will get clogged up. And I know some people do not want big, heavy pots. So some people do use polystyrene in the bottom because it's lightweight and you can still get some drainage down there. You break that up and put that in the bottom of a wee container. Personally, I wouldn't use it for anything with edibles, but put that in the bottom and it's much lighter weight. Now it's going to take me a wee while to get this. Does anybody have any wee questions? Well, I am filling this all further up. Your compost should be wet. You can sort of see the darkness of that. That is damp. And if you buy a bag of compost, don't leave it open, you know, out the back door or out the back or in a shed open, because it will dry out. You want to fold down the top of the bag, and that keeps it moist. If it dries out, it won't hold water, and it's sort of ruins it really to some extent, because if your soil doesn't hold water, it's not really any good to your plants for watering. So I'm gonna pop this out and put the azalea in first, and I do like to check the root system and just see if it's a healthy plant. So there weren't any roots coming out the bottom, so happy enough with that. But you can see good healthy root system there, and that's going to go at the back. And I'm going to put some grasses sort of over to the side, and I'm going to try to angle those a wee bit, just a tiny bit, so they'll sort of come over the edges. And you can see just the root system there, the grass there. It's a bit loose because actually have taken them out of some other pots. So they're going to go in, and I'm going to put two, just one on each side. And I'm not going to use the black Mondo grass. I'm just going to use these. I thought these color of these would tie in a bit better. And so they've got sort of that coppery color, and then the azaleas are going to be salmon, and then the wee burgundy pansies sort of up the front. My soil is quite compacted. So what I'm going to do is just fill in around these plants. Just to the same level that they were in their wee containers. And I can push them down a wee bit and firm them in. I don't really want any air pockets around the plants. Now, if you had in the autumn time, if you were doing a wee planter in the autumn, something like this could have been planted up in the autumn time, and you could have put some wee bulbs, you know, to come up, like the daffodils, the small short daffodils, tete, or some crocuses, wee crocuses or something in there. And that would have given a wee bit of color, maybe early on before the pansies were going to come into flower. You can get autumn pansies and wee plants. So you could have your autumn plants there that would have taken you through sort of maybe autumn until now, possibly. And now replacing those with some wee plants for color this time of year. These wee pansies, they're great wee plants, and they will flower up to about May time, which is great. It takes us into summer. I'm just going to pop some of those out. There's red and purple and cream looks here. So I'm going to go with the sort of burgundy ones for a color scheme. Those out. See, it's a bit noisy. You can sort of see those have a good root system. Again, well, yeah, they need planted. You can see the roots there starting to go in a circle. that need planted. Great wee plants. And then you can see the wee flower going off there. So I don't need that. You deadhead, I'm sure a lot of you who have plants know that you deadhead your wee flowers as they're going over. And that just keeps them flowering for a longer time. So you just pinch those off. So every time you're going by your front door, have a wee look, or wherever you've got your wee pot, and just pinch off any flowers that are going over. That one there could be pinched off as well. So you can sort of see how that's coming together. And again, you use all sorts of plants. The grasses really were, ideally something that was going over the edges. And in the summer, you get all sorts of plants that would be trailing over the edges, from, trailing petunias to trailing verbena, all sorts of lovely things, or some ivy, which can stay in all the time. And that means you can just replace the plants at the front. I'm gonna build that up a wee bit there, the height for the wee pansies. And filling around. Now the wee pansies will grow. That one seems a bit floppy, but anyway, push that down. It will grow a bit and get taller. But one thing that, is good about them being, just below the container is, they'll be protected a little bit from, all the wind when they're first planted, and they will sort of fill out a wee bit. I'm sure many of you have grown, pansies and violas many a time. They're very, very common plants, readily available this time of year. So I'm making a wee hole, and you just want them planted at the same level that they are, not lower and not really taller, just at the same wee level. And you can push them in and just put your wee pansies around. So if I was putting slow release fertilizer in, I would have just put that in as I was filling up the topsoil there. I'm not going to bother with that. And just pop as many of these in as I can sort of get. And I'm going to put the flowering ones at the front, and I'm going to put those right up to the edge of the pot. And I'm putting in more, like I say, than I would into the ground. You need to give them a bit of space, about, 10 or, well, about a plant. A good way to look at spacing of one of these wee pots. If I was planting them into the ground, I would definitely space them. My next one would maybe go there, and I would space out at least sort of a hand in between, just to give them a bit of room. But in a pot, you can definitely get away with putting them closer together, because I want more flowers. They need a wee bit of space to develop. And I've ended up with 5 there. They say to plant things in groups of 3, 5, 7, etc. So in a way, this is a group of 3, and that's sort of a grouping of 5. And just take off these wee gloves here. Always good to wear gloves when you're, well, outside in the garden, but when you're handling your compost. So, so like I say, that will fill out, and I'd be checking that every couple of days, just to pinch off any flowers. And really, that one's ready to be pinched off. So we'll just do that. And they will bulk out. And then in terms of watering, I want to check this every couple of days. Even now, when it rains quite a lot, I'm in a very windy location, so I find that the wind can dry out a lot of the pots, especially coming into spring, and sometimes when it doesn't rain quite as much. So I would check my pots, even if it rains outside, because if you're in a windy location, it can really dry out your pots. This is a plastic pot. Clay pots are great as well. This one is, I've just painted the front door, sort of a black color. I thought the gray pot would sort of fit in with it. And then I'm going to be getting some color here. You can see the wee buds coming with the azalea. And of course, these are going, now that they're potted and have a bit of room to grow, I'm going to get lots of flowers there, and those can stay, or if they're getting too big, they can sort of come out, and come summer, I can replace either all of this, or I could leave this, the 3 in the back. Once that flowers, that'll just be like a little evergreen sort of shrub, looking, it's just a bit of green. So the summer I could leave that, and then just get some nice summer plants, even a couple of trailing ones, and a begonia or something to flower sort of there for the summer. So it gives a bit of variety around what I can do with that. Again, that's quite heavy. I'm going to put that down there and shift the pots. There you go. Bit messy. Get a wee chair to sit and just this wee bit. It's a wee bit messy doing some gardening inside. So I have to excuse the mess. You can see I have plenty of those left over. So that's great. I'm gonna go out and plant those in any wee tubs. Have lots of tubs outside with, daffodils and crocus and various things, but they're too heavy, really too heavy to bring in to sort of show you. And if you want to ask anything at all, feel free, or put it in the chat box. And I wanted to show you just some wee pebbles. Now, I know I have a giant bag of multi-purpose compost, but you can buy smaller bags, which is great. Some of the garden centers have smaller bags and different shops, because it's very, very hard to carry some of these large bags of multi-purpose compost and things. And also around wee rocks and mulch that you can put on top of your containers. A lot of times B&Q in the garden centers, these bags that are just so heavy and to lift. So if any of you are worried about, heavy bags of things, if you want to add a wee decorative mulch, you can just get a wee bag of stones, which is great. So these came from B&M. If you had a white pot, you could put maybe some black stones on top, or black pot sort of white stones. And these wee packs of stones cost 49p. So that's a great alternative to anyone's not wanting to buy huge bags of stones, or wee alpine rocks, which are great to put on top of plants. But a big bag of that was about £5. And it's really hard to carry. And of course, you can get big bags of the white rocks, or smaller bags, and B&M and things like that. Look out for those to decorate your pots and sort of put on top. So I'm going to leave that one for now. And I know before I put the wee stones on the indoor container, and sort of just gives it a nice wee finish if you're giving it for a gift for someone. So I'll just check what about primroses? Yes, primroses. There's all sorts of great wee flowers. Yes, primroses are readily available and they're lovely wee plants that you can get for baskets or for your containers. And there should be sort of coming into shops if they're not already. We're sort of limited with what shops we're going into at the minute, so it's hard to know what's really available. I know I was driving by Home Bargains and I noticed they had a trolley outside with spring plants. I'm not really sure. It was probably maybe primrose and pansies and things like that. I was able to pick up that wee container of pansies at B&Q. So it's very difficult at the minute. I think some of the florists and garden centers hopefully will be able to take orders for click and collect. And I know some places are doing home delivery. And, you can get some plants delivered, order them online and things like that. And if anybody knows any tips around where to get plants, feel free to let us know or put it in the chat box, because it's very difficult at the minute to access, plants and things. And I haven't heard any update about the garden centers either. If anyone else has heard any update on what's happening. Do plants need different fertilizer? That's a good question, because the wee azalea plant, azaleas, camellias, and rhododendron and heathers are common plants that are like a different type of soil. They're ericaceous. So you can get a Miracle-Gro that will say for, this one doesn't, but it will say for azalea, camellia, rhododendrons, and that's your feed. I didn't have any left. I usually have this special feed for those plants because I have azaleas in the garden, and I would give them a wee feed coming into spring. So there is a different fertilizer. Now the wee plant tag that came with that azalea, it says on it, use any general purpose plant food, but for azaleas in general, or sometimes the leaves will start yellowing, and sometimes that's a nutrient deficiency. And so I would get this special Miracle-Gro or fertilizer that says on the box for rhododendrons, azalea, and camellias. So let's see. Oh, here's somebody saying Homebase. Oh, Homebase, is Homebase still open? Homebase have loads of Flaming Katie. So that lovely succulent, it doesn't look like a succulent, except the leaves are very thick and fleshy. And it's a common house plant that is, I love it because it flowers a lot. It seems to keep flowering for a long time. And then it sort of grows slowly, quicker than most succulents. It can go quite leggy over time. I have one that's gone quite leggy, and I just cut off wee pieces of it and stick it in soil, and you can make new plants and just wait for it to root. So it's a great wee plant, and Maura's saying that they have it at Homebase. Are you sure it's Homebase, Maura? Yeah, it's not being, I thought Homebase was closed. Maybe there is a Homebase somewhere, but.
Sorry, Kelly, I live in Cookstown, and yes, it is opened, and you can see the shelves, a lot of the shelves empty, as you say, difficult to get a lot of the wee pansies and stuff. But yes, they have loads of them, they have trays of them. So that's Homebase.
The one in Omagh. I was going to say the one in Omagh is open as well.
Yeah. Brilliant. I wasn't sure if all the Homebases had closed altogether, so obviously not. So that's great, because I know a couple of them have closed even before COVID stuff. So that's great. I'll just show you the Flaming Katie again in this wee container, in case you're not familiar with it, but it's that wee one there. Now it's in this container. I mean, ivy grows, you know, it's hard to kill ivy. The wee peace lily would need more water than the other two, especially the flaming Katie. So I tend to water on that side. That's sort of, you know, so giving more water to the peace lily, and then the succulent, the flaming Katie, can tap into that water, you know. So we're hoping that that would keep all the plants in that container happy. But you could put that wee flaming Katie just in a pot on its own. I've had mine on a windowsill that faces southeast, and it says not to have it on a windowsill with direct sunlight. But the way it's positioned, it's slightly sort of shaded a bit. So, but they love, you know, a light location, and the watering, you know, you can, it's sort of succulent. So, you know, it doesn't, it can survive if you've forgotten to water it. And I suppose it doesn't like to sit in water. So if you get one, I would just put a few wee pebbles maybe in the bottom of your wee container, your wee plant pot, and then set it down, and there on top of the wee gravels or horticultural grit. And that way, you know, if you do overwater, a lot of people do overwater, the water is going to sit down into those gravel rather than sitting on the roots, and it just, the plants just don't like it, and then, you know, will die eventually, and the roots start rotting. So that's a great wee tip, Maura. Brilliant. Does anybody want to ask any wee questions or about other spring sort of plant, all the wee primrose, violas, pansies this time of year? If you see wee pots of daffodils, they are lovely, but just keep in mind, if you buy a wee pot of daffodil, even just, you know, sink into a container, they'll only last for, you know, 5 days to a week, and then they'll be finished. So it's, you know, not really great value if you're looking for some color to take you into sort of summer. So you definitely, you know, the pansies, the violas, the primrose, things like that will take you up to kind of May, June, and then all the wee summer bedding plants will be coming into play. And one thing that's good about these wee pansies is you can sort of, when they're sort of finished flowering, depending on your weather conditions, but I have some that have kept going. I don't get a lot of hard frost where I'm at, hardly get frost. I'm near the water. I'm in Antrim Newton Abbey Council area, but I'm near the water, so I wouldn't get those hard frosts that are, you know, other locations get. And some of the wee plants will sort of come back. Even some of the summer bedding plants, like the trailing verbena and different things, where they would die in some areas, I can get away with, they would come back again. So sometimes I leave plants and see, you know, what happens. And sometimes they do sort of come back, but I know a lot of you might not, you might have different conditions than that. You might have more frost around where you live. So that's sort of us, unless anybody wants to ask any other questions or a favorite spring plant that they have. And if not, I know some of you are good gardeners. I can tell. You always know gardeners. They love their plants, and they love a bit of color in the spring and summer. So next week we're looking at alpine plants, and I have some alpine plants already. And again, sometimes I'm not getting quite what I want for the demonstration, but I just have to work with what I can get access to. You know, just have to be flexible that way. So great wee tip about home base, and thank you very much for coming today, and I hope you have a lovely weekend. I hope the weather's good and you can get out and enjoy the garden a wee bit, even with a coat and a hat on. How much height would you expect the azalea to reach in the season? That wee azalea there is slow growing, and I would expect that to not grow much bigger than that. this season. It will grow a wee bit, but I have a few azaleas that I planted a couple of years ago in pots in the garden outside, and they've only grown, let's sort of look out there. They've only grown a small amount, and I would say for that wee plant, don't want to pick it up. You can sort of see it there. That wee plant there, in 2 or 3 years, I would say it would sort of double in size, maybe 3 years. So it is slow growing. And I'm just looking at the wee plant tags, which I always try to keep. And I mentioned this in one of the other sessions. I keep the tags and keep them in a wee drawer because sometimes I forget. And I usually write where I bought the plant and the date, the year, because it just helps me sort of remember where the plants have come from. And I can also tell, sort of the quality of the plant, things like that. But on the wee plant tag, it says it will get 1 meter wide. That's the maximum, roughly over time, and 1.5 meters tall. If you put that in the ground, I find plants that are going into the ground will grow quicker than plants in a pot because the pot sort of contains them a wee bit. They still need nutrients in the pot, so you're feeding them, but they do grow slower in the pots. But the spread 1 meter and 1.5 meters will be when it's fully grown. So you have to think of that when you're maybe planting it into the garden, that you have space for it to grow into. And what I tend to do is I move stuff around. So maybe start with the wee azalea in the planter, and then as it's growing in a year or two, a couple of years, I might move it to a planter on its own. And then if I wanted to go on the ground, I might put it into the ground. But everybody's different with their gardening. But for the wee pot, it works out really well. And those wee azaleas, there's a wee price of it, 4 for £11. 4, so you can get, it came from B&Q as well. And they have lots of different types of plants at the minute. And you can get 4 for £11, which for that size, I suppose that's a pretty good price for that size of a plant. So thank you, everyone. And it's sort of lunchtime for some of us, so it's 12 o'clock. And just want to say again, have a great weekend. Hope you can get out into the garden. And I'll see you hopefully next week for some information on some alpine plants. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a great weekend.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Radio. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Have a good weekend.